Good evening and welcome to the August 24th meeting of the Hillsborough Town Board Commissioners. This is our work session. And are there any changes to the agenda?
Move to approve as accepted. Second.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Kathleen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? On to number 3, appointments, or request to reappoint Sarah Reek to the Historic District Commission for a term expiring August 31st, 2029.
Move to approve as presented.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Rob. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Megan. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and on to the first item under section 5, in-depth discussions and topics. Item A, demolition ordinances for 613 Buttonwood Drive and 380 Cornelius Street. Shannon, welcome.
Hello. Yeah, so as you all may recall, code enforcement has been kind of an ongoing effort. We had identified, I believe, 5 initial structures that were vacant and kind of falling apart, not in great shape. I've been working with state code enforcement. We posted the properties, notified the property owners via first class mail as well as return receipt mail. We held a hearing for those cases and gave these folks 90 days. We had one property over on Corbin that asked for some extra time, went to the Board of Adjustment, that was granted. They're working on that, so you can see the fencing and stuff up on Corbin Street. We had a property owner on Terrain that went ahead and demolished of their own volition. We also had one at 533 West King that demolished of their own volition. And so these are the last 2 properties that are left where the property owner has not made any headway in these cases. So the next steps at this point are for this board to authorize the demolition ordinances. We're working on getting bids for the demo. And what they do is they come in, demolish, take everything off site, and then they seed and straw to kind of get the property back stabilized.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Shannon about the process?
I have one quick question. Is that 17,000? That's for both properties?
Yes.
Demolition and remediation?
Yeah, and that's just an estimate. We were still getting bids when the item had to go into your packet so that you had the time to review it.
I think you answered my other question. These are the last 2 that are still kind of out there.
Definitely.
He asked my question.
I have a quick question regarding abatement, especially in older homes. How do we know that there's not asbestos and lead paint that might get in the ground?
So Eric may be able to better answer that question, but we are actually working with Orange County Building Inspections on whether or not they're gonna require any lead or asbestos abatement. The properties, more often than not, are already kind of falling apart. And so if they were leaking those materials, they would already have been doing so. If the property is more intact, you are required to do an asbestos abatement before you demolish. But given the severity of some of the rot of some of these homes, we're talking with Orange County about whether or not we'll have to do that or not.
Okay, thank you. And any other questions about the process and notification and dotting i's and crossing t's?
What does the process if a property owner goes over the 90 days, but it's not a tear down situation, but they've kind of gone through the steps and then they've stopped? And when do we come back and be like, all right, you gotta restart doing something? Like they've gotten to a point where they've gotten approvals or they're like waiting for contractors, or they just kind of stop moving forward on the process. But
So if they start the demolition process on their own, they have to apply for building permits. Once they do that, that 90 days is kind of out the window and the ball is now in their court. For both of these properties, the property owner has not done anything since we had their hearing.
I'm kind of wondering about properties that, I know there's one property that went through the HDC, got their approval and has not done anything in over 90 days. And so wondering about those types of properties.
So that's a different situation. That property, I believe you're talking about the South Occoneechee Street property. That property went through the historic district's demolition by neglect process, which is a separate process from these properties. They're outside of the district. we do need to circle back, Bob, about, what we're going to do about that property. To my knowledge, there has not been any movement, and so we may have to start issuing civil citations there. Because that property is in the district, the preference is for it to be rehabilitated versus torn down. So we're gonna make every effort we can to have that property restored.
And then there were a couple other properties in the district also, right, that were on the list to kind of, are they going through the same process?
We're gonna have to touch base with the HDC about kind of how they want to handle them. Obviously, the HDC's preference is to have historic properties and properties in the district restored. However, if they've already fallen down, I think it's safe to say we can skip that step, but I would not feel comfortable doing that without the HDC involved in some way.
Yeah, I think the ones that I'm thinking of are all in the HTC. I'm wondering what that process, but.
Yeah, there are a couple. There's also a couple that we received complaints where the property owners are trying to shore them up and trying to get them to where they're at least secured to kind of buy some time while they figure out what they want to do. It's a big decision for a lot of people. Sometimes, family member passed away or they're ill, and so they just kind of need to get the house where it's secured so that animals and water and stuff aren't getting inside, and we can work with them.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some cost. I think it's more expensive to have a house in the historic district than outside too.
Matt runs 5A towards the end. Do you have any questions? Nope. The two demolitions. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Is there a motion?
Yes, well, I move to, where am I moving to? I move to approve the demolition ordinance moving forward, the demolition of approval.
Second.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Kathleen. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thanks, Jim. And moving on to item B, review and discussion of the draft affordable housing strategy. Assistant Town Manager Matt Eford and Hunter Phillips is here as well from Central Finance Regional Council. Good evening.
We still need to.
Good evening. While Sarah's pulling this up, I'll just do a brief introduction and turn this over to Hunter to get started. As you all recall, the board funded an affordable housing strategy plan in the FY 26 budget. We were delayed several months by Tropical Storm Chantal. And so this is your first touch point on those draft strategies. I believe all of you had an opportunity to meet with Hunter during the information gathering, so he should be familiar to you. For those of you who are not here or watching, Hunter Pillars is the housing program manager for Central Pines Regional Council. They were our contractor for this strategy. So a couple of notes, as Hunter goes through this, the full strategy document is still being finalized. Once we get the final draft of the document, we will send it to you all and we'll post to the website. We're working with communications now on the tool we're going to use to collect public comments at that point. And then we will do some direct outreach to the development community and our nonprofit housing partner to get their feedback on these draft strategies. So what we asked for tonight is you all to take a look at the framework, some of the data points that Central Pines has pulled together. Once we get through tonight, we'll sort of transition, we'll end the contract with Central Pines. And then the document will become staff's to take over the finish line. So we'll finalize the draft, we'll do the public engagement and bring it back to you all. Hopefully in the next few months for final adoption. Any questions before Hunter gets started?
Hunter, welcome.
All right, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Matt. It's good to be back in Hillsborough. Good to see familiar faces. Yeah, as Matt was saying, after Chantal, the work picked up really throughout 2026. So that's kind of the timeline that we've been working with. And yeah, tonight we're excited to kind of present and talk about a little bit of the backgrounds, how we develop the strategy, look at a few key data points, but not prolong it, and then kind of look at the framework of the strategy, which we've kind of put into goals, pillars, and then the strategies themselves. And then Matt kind of outlined the next steps, but we'll love to have questions and feedback at the end, so that we can kind of implement that into the draft. So,
Hunter, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
So it's, for some of us, this is a fairly detailed presentation, and
Yeah.
it's your goal to go do the presentation, and do you want us to hold all of our questions to the end, or I have a suggestion?
Yeah.
And that is there are 5 sections to the document. After the end of each section, then we can go around the table and ask questions. That way they might be a little bit more germane.
That sounds like a good plan to me. I don't know where the sections are divided, so if you just want to give me an indication of where they are, we can stop. I'm not sure if it was in the packet or.
It is, yeah, first it's background.
Oh, well, there you go. All right. All right. Well, the background is I just wanted to start by pointing out Hillsborough's housing commitment that has already been established. So if you look in the comprehensive sustainability plan, it states very clearly that all residents in Hillsborough, regardless of age, race, or income, should have access to safe and attainable housing. And so that really reiterates the idea that housing is kind of the core to establishing yourself in the community, setting yourself up for success, your family, your work life, your education. And with that core commitment, Hillsborough has also made the financial commitment of $320,000 per year back from FY '24. So it's really important to establish that. But before I jump into this strategy and kind of what we're seeing on the ground, any questions there? Okay, great. So this slide, really these first 2 data points kind of paint a good picture. Going back over the past 10 years, Hillsborough has seen an 88% growth in its home value. So 10 years, getting close to doubling. And so it's just an intense growth pressure. And we were able to find this middle data point, which is taken from IRS immigration migration data. And so what it shows is that the households that are coming into Orange County, into Hillsborough, are making on average about $20,000 or $19,000 more than the households that were already here. And so you're seeing this very high demand, not only the kind of natural demand in the town, but those coming from outside with more resources, kind of adding to this intense pressure on the housing cost, raising them for residents who have been here for a while, senior residents who may have limited resources. And the picture that paints is that we want to have a strategy that supports kind of that market and supply problem. So of course, building housing is extremely important, but this strategy kind of weaves its way through subsidy, regulatory reform. So looking at on the margins where may you be able to make changes that can help with housing and repairs, and partnerships with developers, community partners, and those things that can support the supply. And so this quote, the supply alone won't address this problem. This was from the Orange County Housing Retreat where the Urban Institute presented, and that was kind of a key quote that stood out from that meeting. And so this strategy does weave together all of those approaches. So
Before we move on,
Yeah.
I'd like to point out that I was listening to a national radio program in the past week or 2, and they were talking about in-migration and the importance of North Carolina. I think it's number 3 in immigration from other states, primarily in California, Florida, and maybe New York. And so that I think we've all seen that and heard that before, especially from our State of the Community addresses over the past several years, that it still continues to be an important influencer in our housing market. So this is the first time I've ever seen a dollar amount attached to
right.
those in-migration households and how they have more leverage and how that may lead to an inflation factor on top of natural increasing home values. So
Right. And if I remember the data point correctly in the strategy document itself, the majority of those households are coming from California, and pushing out households. I believe they're going to Alamance and surrounding areas. So yeah, it's not, people coming from surrounding states. It's really North Carolina is fast growing. So, and I think it's things that we've noticed, right? Those are on the ground kind of day to day. We know housing costs are up and anecdotally we see that, but that data point paints a really good picture, I think. But with this particular slide here, talking about the input that we got throughout this process, we had actually conducted a pretty thorough Orange County wide outreach in the spring of 2025. And so what we did, we were able to use the survey responses we got through that process, some of the in-person meetings to inform this strategy. So you can see some of the numbers there, but we were also able to sit down with almost all the commissioners. We had one-on-one interviews to kind of talk about priorities and what you're hearing from residents that inform this. And then, of course, the data and needs analysis. So we have data from lots of varied sources to help paint this picture.
Hunter? Or is this one of the
Yeah, go
following?
Yeah, feel free to stop me at any time.
So the residential and stakeholder survey, I know, and obviously I know that you met with each of us individually. But that first one, what I'm wondering is, how was that actually done? Was it surveys that were sent out? Was it, and was it random residents within Hillsborough? Is that the first part of the resident part of it?
Yeah, so we had a digital survey that we were able to get out through social media, various sources. But we also did community meetings with paper surveys in English and Spanish. And so a lot of it was Orange County wide, but for Hillsborough, we were at, the Dorothy Johnson Center with the Fairview community. I had really good attendance there and translators, and so we were able to get kind of live feedback at the meeting and then also the survey. So on the survey, it asked, do you live in Chapel Hill, Hillsborough, where do you work? And then we were able to narrow down those responses to just Hillsborough residents.
So you mentioned the Dorothy Johnson Center. What other community areas did you?
We were at Eflin Cheeks, Cedar Grove, Arena down in Chapel Hill, and Marion Cheeks Jackson Center. But again, we have a lot of good data to compare it to, but Hillsborough was limited to those 19 responses, or the in-person comments live.
I guess I would wonder why, maybe like newer developments like Waterstone, let's say, like why not getting information from a new development area versus to also get that mix, because there's so many different points coming from residents in Hillsborough that while the Fairview community is very important to understanding what we're gonna do, that there's older established neighborhoods, there's newer ones, and what was the thought process behind?
Hunter, feel free to correct me, but so this was work that was done prior to their engagement with us, and it was done on behalf of Orange County Housing. And so those communities that were targeted, they were part of the CDBG consolidated planning effort. And so they did deliberate outreach to those lower income communities.
Yeah, that's correct. And we wanted to rely on this data because it was, I think we had 7 community meetings, and overall there was 107 responses to the survey, which today is pretty good feedback. And so that we felt this was a good base. But yeah, I think that's great feedback about further, public comment.
Yeah, I think I would want to hear from, and I'm just throwing these out as examples, like the Harmony at Waterstone, like what drove people to move to those locations? Were they in perhaps the historic district and they moved out of a single, like a NOAA home, and now they're moving into it? Like, is that a product that we're missing, or is that, I'm just like brainstorming here.
Yeah.
So then I was kind of thinking like, you'd want to hear from those types of residents to find out like, what brought you to this type of home, a smaller home, maybe you're older, maybe, so. That's something that I think as we develop this plan, that I think we need to hear from all interested parties. Before we move on to the second part, I was wondering about the stakeholder portion, and was that part of the same process for the CP?
That was a part of that process, but it wasn't Hillsborough specific. And so that will be kind of the next piece, I think, that Matt mentioned, developers, key partners, to get their input.
Yeah, cause one of the questions I wrote down here is, how are we gonna, actually, now I gotta find it, sorry, I wrote a bunch of questions, but how are we gonna identify who those key partners are, like, make sure that we perhaps in small business, developers doing small lot renos or infill and stuff like that, but also maybe if we need to talk to the people that do Collins Ridges and that kind of thing, it's just making sure we get those key pieces, and as long as bringing in the financial folks and finding out what are they gonna bring to the party to help this whole strategy. So, because there's kind of like, I don't know if that was really a question, but just kind of the thoughts that I'm thinking through of who I'd like to see at the table and when we go through this
We'll
stuff.
address that in the next steps.
Okay.
I'll just note that I had almost the exact same questions with that, a response of only 19 actual residents attached. That is so small. But what I'm inferring from what you just said, that this was a baseline that is countywide, that helps inform what our outreach might be once the draft is completed to engage residents
Yeah.
and developers and stakeholders.
Correct. I think, and Matt and I discussed, with the timeline that we were on, we really wanted to get this document, get a draft and get it to you all, with the feedback that we had. I jumped to the next slide because this kind of shows, maybe not to the survey questions that you had asked, but this was a very, I guess, targeted survey with housing questions. And so it was really to define like funding priorities, for those federal funds for the county,
Mhm.
which aligns similarly with, how does this strategy inform Hillsboro's investment, in those areas? So if you look on the feedback from residents over there, you can see that, they were able to kind of place their priorities, from a set list in order. And so the first priority was the preservation of existing housing. And so there was a real concern, at least in the communities that we touched, in displacement from, exorbitant repairs or not being safe in their home. And I think what you brought up was really good feedback for maybe more specific contextual questions about, why did you move this place and rent this? So.
Well, it seems like that there are different questions. There's, why did you move
Mhm.
into Hillsborough? Why did you choose this house? And some of that is when you don't have much stock, you don't have much choice. And then there is the aspect of priorities of existing residents. And it would make sense that those priorities are going to vary based on their resources. And we already know that for this the K-shaped economy, we're going to see divergent priorities and we're going to see divergent perspectives.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and you can imagine that, I think the Fairview, for example, a lot of it were renters who maybe their landlords weren't making repairs that were needed. And so, maintenance was a real issue, that we heard. To your point, kind of that second issue, rental and down payment assistance, for working families. That was the second priority, which shows that, the housing opportunities and kind of the choice is not there. People may want to own, maybe they want to rent, for their lifestyle. So maybe they need different styles of housing. There's a point later in the slide, 79% of Hillsboro's housing stock is single family. So I think that, top needs identified, obviously affordable housing is one, and lack of diversified types as well. And so it may be that somebody wants to buy a one bedroom or rent a 1 bedroom and it may not be there.
I think a little bit of the point that I'm like, someone might be staying in a home that could have a family of 4, but there's no other option for them to go. And
We see
are we
that,
missing those products?
we see that in the apartments.
Mhm,
There are very few 3-bedroom apartments and they stay rented out.
mhm.
The other thing is, with the influx, and this is one of the differences that we see when you have influx of population. When you have resources, you have essentially the pick of the litter of your neighborhoods. Except you really don't, because we don't have that much stock available. People are staying put. So there's a little bit of artificiality of why did you pick this house when you've got different forces of, well, what did you have to choose from? Why did you choose Hillsborough? And a lot of people do it because one spouse is in Raleigh and the other's in Greensboro, and this is halfway. In addition to, we want to be here. So there's a lot of different forces going on, in addition to a lot of people, our apartments are, last I saw, was like 95+% filled, which is high. And the reason being is they're waiting on houses. And then the people who live here, again, is stratified on resourcing. Can you afford to repair? Can you afford the home that you really want? And, you know, some want density, some want land, some want, you know, expanded families. And some just want to get into a house.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, we wouldn't really be surprised by these priorities, right? Or these top needs. I mean, it's affordable housing. It's top of mind. And if we look at the commissioner side of this, you know, similar responses, but when we met with each of you, we had a discussion and really pulled out that like preservation and housing opportunities for people is also a shared priority. There wasn't like, you know, across the board agreement on everything. And so this strategy also outlines, you know, where should income targeting happen? You know, is it 30% AMI? Is it the 60%, 80%, 120% AMI? And then also, how much do you fund preservation and repair versus new builds? And so, again, we got all of that information, and this strategy tries to address those choices there. But any questions on this point? Again, we won't dive too much into this data. Some of it is a repeat from earlier. But the one that I would point out especially is the bottom center number. And that is just showing that since 2020, that Hillsboro's population has grown by over 7%. And so I believe that is a very fast number by any measure. So again, growth pressure, fast growing, things you're all aware of, but that leads to the housing affordability issue.
I'm interested on how you get fair market value in 17, because I'm seeing that for 1 bedroom, not 2 bedroom.
Yeah, this is a limitation of kind of HUD data.
Okay.
But if you know, the median gross rent is from the census. And so that is a number that's a bit outdated, but just limited to Hillsboro. And so that would have been from the census. The fair market rent is Orange County wide.
Okay.
And that number comes from HUD that they update annually. So we had both because one's more recent. Neither may be what you're seeing on the ground, but those are kind of the housing numbers that we work with across the data.
And what is OSBM?
Oh,
Office of State
budget management.
Thank you, because I'm like going, I know.
That's the
that, but
demographers, yeah.
It's like, I know that, but I don't know that. I'm like, I know it, but
Well, I'm glad you know.
not a clue.
Yeah,
So Hunter, are the statistics on the slide for Orange County versus Hillsborough
Yeah.
specific, and did they come from the work that you're doing?
No, these are just pulled, so you can see that the median home value, for instance, was April 2026. Everything that is available at the town level, so the home value growth and the median gross rent is town level data, the 7.1%, and the housing units, and then that fair market rent is a federal number that is assigned to counties.
And what's the date on the American Community Survey of 1368 per month?
That data set would have been the 2024, I think 2019 to 2024. So it's still probably a year, 2 or 3 out of date, but that's the most recent census number.
And that's for 1 bedroom, 1360.
I think that's just reported as household
Across the
rents.
board.
Yeah, across the board. But
I can say, as a renter of multiple bedrooms, it's got like a little bit of space in Hillsborough between those dates, that number's accurate.
okay, that's good to know. So you can imagine a future survey might ask for rent, so that we're not limited to census data, just to see what we're dealing with. So. All right, another data slide here, but really wanted to point at the cost burden numbers for households in town. So cost burden is a household that's paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And so it's a widely used number. If you look at owners in town, 18% are spending more than a third of their income on housing. But really the number that stands out is for renters. So 1 out of 2 renter households is spending 30% of their income on rents, on mortgages. And if you look at that top number, those who are spending over half of their income on housing, 1 in 4 households, that are renting. So that right there shows that, you know, whatever that rent number ends up being today, people are spending most of their income on housing. And we pulled the housing wage, I believe this is at the county level, but $32.90 an hour is what a household would need to have an income to afford a 2-bedroom. So we pulled some of the occupations in town. And so across the board, it was about $29.19 an hour for those wages, not accounting for outliers, but you know, things like social service workers, their household, and that's household might average $28 an hour. So under the wage, right?
I have an observation to make, which is just that in the 2020 census, approximately 40% of residents rented versus owned. So if we look at renters who are cost burdened at almost 50%, that 1-to-1, I mean, we're talking about a quarter of our residents being cost burdened.
That's kind of, be my question for the owners that are cost burdened. Is that calculation based off of homeowners that carry a mortgage, or is it based off of wages in Hillsborough versus the value of their home?
So it would have been reported on the census. And so it would have been those with a mortgage stating, you know, what income bracket they fall in and what their mortgage cost would be.
So it's harder to calculate what that you just calculated out, trying to figure out like, is it 10% of our total
Right,
population that's cost burdened, or is it? Okay.
Right. It could be doable. I think that's a great point.
Probably have to get into like deep into the data to.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to do the same thing when you were bringing it up, and it's like, what does that mean per house? Homeowners. Yeah, that might be.
That's certainly a number that we could dig down
So,
to.
because
Yeah.
if I hear what you're saying, maybe, I don't know. If it's, we'd have to be paying a mortgage or rent for it to be captured. If you.
Well, that was my question.
Yeah,
Is it
If you,
based
if
off?
you own your own home and it's paid off,
Mhm.
I don't know how that would be captured because
Well, if it was captured based off of what the average wage versus home value is versus instead of do you carry a mortgage? We'll just be like.
that tells you what your wage and home value, doesn't tell you who's paying for the home. And we have homes where moms and dads are paying for their kids.
Kathleen, my interpretation of that was that they might not have a mortgage, but they may be struggling to pay property taxes.
That absolutely,
That
I-
their perception is because.
Yeah,
absolutely,
there's all of them.
absolutely. But but I'm not sure. I mean, but that's the mortgage and taxes, absolutely. But I don't know how you would capture, which I'm curious.
Food for thought.
And generally in this number, you would want to include utilities as well.
Yeah.
So someone who doesn't have a mortgage, they can still have energy bills, maybe not an efficient home. And so that would be sensitive to this number as well.
You can probably tell we like to know how things work on this board, and so.
Yeah,
We'll get you the definition for ACS.
and if we can get to those numbers too, we'll make a note to follow up.
Well, that's kind of like where it is like, is it based off just mortgages? Is it?
Yeah.
Is it utilities and taxes? Is it more than just? You know. So.
All right, this might be the last data slide, but this shows kind of the housing gap, kind of instead of looking at incomes, more looking at units and availability. And so we looked at the data to see how many of the naturally occurring affordable housing units are in the town. And that number was 967 as of summer of 2025. That's as most recent as our data set is. But we were able to kind of see how much the rents were at those units. And you can see that while those are affordable to 80% AMI and below, there was zero affordable at 30% AMI. And what that means is that if a unit is not subsidized, it's just market rate, but affordable. If you're making under 30% AMI, it's still not something that's very achievable. only 75 below that 60% AMI number. And so really the majority of all the affordable part of units is at that 80%, kind of 60 to 80% AMI level. And then what that means is kind of an approximation, but looking at what the demand is for affordable units based on income brackets. The household, there's kind of 9 households looking for every one affordable unit, which is very kind of surprising and daunting number, I think.
That's lower actually than what I'm last had seen.
Right, and I think our team did kind of a generous assumption, so that, yeah, it could be still higher as well. I will say that the good news on this slide, not to be all doom and gloom, but the town has about 1,800 units in its pipeline, and so those will be coming online. And so that's, something that is addressing these issues.
Well, at market rate, it would not address the issues of those, and I'm thinking of the disabled, of those who are
Yeah.
retired. It's not necessarily, if of those who are retired from, essential workers. That's not gonna help them.
Right, good point, which is, at the beginning, we kind of said that can't just build kind of to solve this issue. But certainly a good note there.
But it does take pressure off
Right.
off the market.
My question is, and maybe it's inferred in the information, but how many affordable units that are subsidized do we have either completed or in the pipeline or that are occupied now?
Yeah,
That
I didn't see-
number, and I forgot.
I didn't see the number on the slide, and I was really expecting to see that number.
Yeah, no,
As
that's
a percentage of the 4,700 households.
Right. May have to get back to you on that number. Yeah, should have included it.
I used to have that number. It was,
We've seen it several times. So-
Yeah.
but I don't know what it is anymore.
We'll make a note. Yeah.
Because I think it'll be important for us to be able to measure and track how we're doing, because as more housing units are built, is our problem getting worse? So is our affordable housing, new demand, new housing keeping pace with, those are some metrics that I think we're all gonna be very interested in.
Got it. Question? All right. So now we're kind of shifting from the data slides to kind of the framework of the goals and the strategies themselves. And so when we started doing this, based on the feedback, we outlined this kind of shared vision. And so these 3 overarching goals were kind of the guiding principles. So 1 was to increase the supply of affordable housing. 2 was to preserve the existing housing units, and then 3 was long-term affordability. And so the goal there would be to address, elderly and disabled residents through subsidy and ensuring that units remain, affordable 20, 30 years or more. So those were the guiding principles. And then what we did was develop what we call pillars. And so we have 4 pillars that all of the strategies are gonna fall under, kind of fold up into, and they're all color coded, which is a little helpful for me. But the 4 pillars that we landed on, first was preservation and stability, which I feel like I've said preservation a lot. It's a popular word tonight. 2 is regulatory and land use reform. So think things that your planning department is doing, the UDO rewrites. Pillar 3 is looking at developer incentives and tools, providing some ideas of frameworks there. And then 4 is, again, that permanent affordability. And so the strategy I'm about to go through will align with one of those pillars. And then this is, I won't read all these off yet because we'll go through, but the document itself outlines the strategies and it provides kind of a cost resource estimate along with like timeframe implementation and kind of steps for tracking and implementing. And so the document itself goes really in depth and provides kind of a guide on how to start these processes, what it might cost, because, some things, it will be something to assess, right? If it's very costly, it's more of something to think about, start the process, but it might be several years out. I'm thinking increased town, staff capacity. That's year 3 or 5 of an implementation plan, for example.
I have a question. I see that we're addressing the nuisance and appearance and things like that, but one of the things is our housing code
Kathleen, I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I see we've got a strategy dealing with nuisance and appearance and such, but, a couple meetings ago, I was asking about minimum housing code because there are communities that are strengthening the minimum housing code because North Carolina's minimum housing code is not good, frankly. And so what passes minimum housing is, it's a crappy place to live if that's all you've got. Does any of this address the opportunity to strengthen where we have, where we can, where it's legal for us to strengthen minimum housing code? So that when people are going into housing, the minimum is not crap to begin with, that then goes downhill.
Yeah, so I don't believe that we get into the minimum housing code. The point of that strategy that we'll talk about a bit is more looking for those things that might be high barrier. So of course you want a minimum, but if you can kind of on the edges find something that's really high barrier for folks to provide maintenance on, that's what that strategy addresses. Yeah, so make sure that those with limited means can address those really challenging ordinances.
Understood, but
Yeah.
Matt, can we take a look at?
Yes, so you brought that up during our strategic plan.
Cause I still know of some landlords who, that you're not supposed to have a hole in the floor, so they throw plywood on top and that passes minimum code.
And so, Shannon, feel free to jump in if you have anything to offer, but we did go through last year and completely redo our code enforcement ordinances,
Right.
focusing on exterior appearance. We for a long time have had an agreement, but that Orange County would enforce minimum housing code. And so the board at some point basically repealed our minimum housing code ordinance, defaults to Orange County's.
But that's inspection, so I was asking if we were taking a look at, sort of what Durham did, were they strengthened? It's not just a matter of who's doing the enforcement, but the actual code itself they revisited.
Right, and we can do that.
Okay,
I'm saying in the past, this board decided to get rid of minimum housing code and default to the counties. And so if that's a policy determination that you all would like to explore, we can certainly do that.
I still would like us to do that. I've never lost the desire for us to do that.
I do have a question, Matt. So if we ditch the counties, I assume we adopted the counties so that the county would do the enforcement for us. So if we were to make the minimum housing code stronger, as Commissioner Ferguson would like us to do, does that mean we then have to assume the enforcement on that?
It could be, we would approach Orange County and ask if they would continue enforcement. We have many contractual relationships with them and maybe something they would do for a fee or a part of it. But
So
if
because
not,
we use their code, we don't have to pay them currently.
correct, not for minimum housing.
Okay.
But it could be that if they weren't able to, or they wanted to charge more than we thought it was worth, then we could have to do it.
Okay, so we'll actually go through each of these. So, we can stop on each slide if anyone has feedback or questions. But under that first pillar, the preservation and stability, the strategies that we recommended, first was to partner with Orange County to see if there's an opportunity to expand their existing tax relief program for longtime homeowners. And secondly, additional funds to do targeted rehabilitation of those NOAA units that we mentioned. So essentially, this would be preservation, rehab, and tax relief funding.
This might be a question for Matt, but I assume that the county's current program, when folks go through it, like they did after revaluation and whatnot, that the tax relief that the county provides is only for the taxes levied by the county. So a resident would still be on the hook for Hillsborough taxes with no.
Yes, for the county program. So Chapel Hill and Carborough have put in funding, both put in funding last year to expand the county's program, to target households in their municipalities. It still impacts the county's tax bill, but it's really, if you think about it, it's more of like a proportion of the total in those, because the credit is a set dollar amount, and so it's coming off of their total tax bill. It's kind of fungible if it's Orange County or if it's town of Carborough taxes, but Carborough is paying so that a household in Carborough has access to it rather than being displaced by an unincorporated county resident. So that's similar to how we've operated the emergency housing assistance and the home repair programs. The countywide program will serve our residents as well as unincorporated residents, but unincorporated residents get priority. When we put money into the pot, into these programs, our residents get dedicated access to that funding. And so it expands opportunities for our residents as well as unincorporated county residents.
Great, thank you.
Do you know the amount of the town of Hillsborough would have to put into that pot?
No, and I can get the numbers that Chapel Hill and Carborough put in. And it would depend on basically what number you would want to spend, because they'll spend as much as we can provide, same as with the emergency housing or the repair. They'll spend up to what we provide.
And this is where the emergency repair money that we have allocated in the past is gone.
Yes, so, and what we should have the data from our pilot program, from Orange County soon. The affordable, on both the emergency housing assistance pilot and the home repair pilot.
Thanks, man. So this next strategy, below, implement policies to support housing stability. But the idea here, rehab programs are very costly. And so the thinking here is just to provide, referral resources, but also maybe access to tools and like small dollar repairs. So if there may be code violations or maybe someone needs to mow their yard, considering a tool truck where they can rent out a weed eater, hammer, a drill, things like that. So this is more of a very small dollar. Yeah.
On this one, I've noticed the access to tools, and I had heard in other municipalities and counties across the US that like libraries have gotten into this game of renting out. Is that something that would be perhaps something to come to Orange County and making, instead of just the Hillsborough only type thing? Is that been a thought or?
Yeah, so our idea would not be to start it on our own. It would be to try to find either a nonprofit partner or the other housing agencies in the county to see if we could collectively build a program like that.
Yeah, and I think there's very successful models. I think Asheville is one of them. So could certainly check with them and see how it's working and how much it costs and those things.
In a presentation that some of you may have seen recently, there was an example. I forget who it was and where the presentation was, but it was interesting.
So the next pillar here is all about, regulatory and land use reform. So again, as we were talking earlier, kind of, reviewing any areas where there might be excessive requirements for low-income owners and renters. I know that I've heard some of the successes with code enforcement recently, so perhaps building on that, but also using code enforcement, more as a carrot and not kind of as a punishment, but just kind of reviewing those. Same with development regulations. So I know the UDO is in the process of being rewritten. We have provided input from Central Pines planning staff to the consultant there. So that may be something that is naturally inputted into that plan. And then this last strategy here, we've talked about it. We've heard it from commissioner staff. But really just looking at anything in the historic district that might be increasing maintenance costs for residents there, assisting them with upkeep, and then also looking at what the current boundaries look like, and then if there's any opportunities there to change those boundaries if it were possible, but we think that at least looking at the, maintenance opportunities there to support, would be a good first step.
I was wondering in this one, the kind of the S3, the residential appearance ordinances, and then a combination with the historic district part, is there a plan to look at the historic district rules and seeing if there's excessive requirements that are in there? Or perhaps, I'm not sure when the last time that's been visited to see, I'm just throwing examples out there, just like, do we need?
Right before you got onto the board, we amended the guidelines, but I would love to take another crack at it.
I'm thinking like windows, like the window that's in the back of my house, does it really have to be all wood? That no one can see, like that's just an example.
So I think a comment that I shared earlier in that line of conversation was that the HTC takes its guidance from the Department of the Interior for their standards. So they follow the federal guidelines, and the State Preservation Office approves that approach. So it's not just us telling the HTC what they can and can't do. It's got to be in coordination with federal standards and the State Historic Preservation Office. Yes, well.
And one of the things from a staff level, both with the UDO process and with this process, we would look to try to find some capacity in the spring for the board to have a joint workshop. So we're working on the fall for a joint workshop with Tourism Board and TDA, and then the spring we would try to, as time allows, get one with the HTC to check in on preservation priorities, things like that. Any updates to that both boards can agree need to be made. So we are trying to find capacity for that.
And I guess then, on what you're saying, Mayor Bell, about the requirements for the historic district being kind of, we don't really set that, but then that's possibly where the boundaries would come in. And maybe we're taking a look at that housing stock and like, is this truly a priority to the in the historic
I
district? Is
think that would be a discussion for the board and the HTC to have together. And it may not be that the boundaries change, but the priorities for preservation. There, in the historic district, there is historic housing stock. There's also housing stock that doesn't have any historic value. And so, but they both have similar sets of standards. And we have a lot of aging stock with residents who have limited means to keep up with that. And so that doesn't help them. It doesn't help the stock. And so again, that's back to the board. How do you want to tinker with those priorities going forward?
Thanks.
Okay, yeah, and I think ADUs would be a part of this. I think there's ADUs being built in town. But again, I'm not sure about the historic district, or if it's harder to build there, for example.
Well,
So, all right, when we get to developer incentives and tools, S7, strategy 7, this is one where in the actual strategy document itself, we have kind of a calculation there to really maybe calibrate is a good word, the fee in lieu contributions for developers who maybe aren't putting affordable units into their development. And so we've looked at what that number might be, but really just trying to get it to a point where it's standardized, but also developers know upfront, and they can really make that decision on, maybe I do want to actually just provide the affordable units in the development itself. But if they choose not to, we've provided kind of guidance and a way to calculate that number for developers. So that's in the strategy itself.
In this right sizing, would that be able to get us closer to a usable number where we can actually translate or transform that fee in lieu to an actual unit or actual repairs, something? Because I know right now we get fee in lieus, but I mean, it's a token.
And it's very tough, from a capacity standpoint, to put those dollars into action and actually build housing as a town,
You
right?
can't.
And so, yeah, this number would try to capture, if based on this calculation, the developer should provide 10 affordable units, and they're not gonna, and they don't want to do that, then they can choose do the calculation and see exactly what they should pay in the fee in lieu, but that should also help with, putting those dollars to action.
I think it would be important, as I read all these pillars and strategies, that some are kind of giving to the developers and some are taking away in terms of their costs. So I think that'll be important to track, kind of what is the total sum that, where we're moving the cost around. What is the town paying based on property taxes versus what are the developers contribute, either in real time or through fee.
But yeah, I think too, I mean, we keep dancing around the market. The market does not give us the ability to do affordable housing. I mean, we're pretending like we have market solutions and we don't. But I'm wondering if there are ways as we do this that we can capture that more effectively so that when it comes time to submit grants through our delegations, that we can do so with additional data of where the market has failed and why we're asking for state and federal funding support or different, even if it's captured in different projects.
Yeah, I think, and our mindset going into that was that, you don't want a number that's too low and the developer's like, yeah, well, oh, no problem, we'll pay that, but then what can you really turn that into? And so, the actual calculation is, what would it cost to build one unit? And if it's 300,000 times 10, then that they know what their number is, as an example. Moving on to these other incentives, leveraging utility capacity and allocations, so that if developments do have affordable housing, perhaps that could be an incentive for developers. And similarly with strategy 12, this is Chapel Hill is actually running a program around like this, where affordable housing, they are, permitting and utility fees are given up front. So whether it's a grant-based relief or, implementing something like that, that's another incentive, someone to choose affordable housing over not.
But how much higher are their fees versus our fees? What's that delta?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Because if you're high, it drop, but if we're fairly, my understanding, we're fairly low.
Mhm.
So they're already getting, unless we're doing that, throw them a bone, but we're already making it, as I understand, making it where it's not cost prohibitive.
And that's something that we can look at.
And we are allowed to charge lower fees for certain kinds of development. There's another prohibition against having different fees.
The devil's in the details. We would probably structure this more similarly as a rebate, so that they would be uniformly applied to all classes of development. But then in exchange for provision of affordable housing, they could access a rebate of those fees. That's the way that the school government has recommended setting that up. Obviously, this is concept, and we would need to work with our attorney to winnow down the details of application.
But can we
Bob,
find
feel
out?
free to jump in if.
Yeah, that's typically the way those kinds of programs work is a rebate program. Because it's like the tax, you can't forgive the tax, but you can collect the tax and then rebate it to the taxpayer one way or another. So that's the same kind of model we follow here.
Instead of a revenue forgiveness, then it becomes an expense. And so there's less controls over how we spend money that we collected.
But can we also compare against some of the other municipalities that are doing this? Because my concern is, while it looks great, hey, municipality A is giving away an X percent. Well, their fees are already higher versus if we are already lower. So we're already at that X percent. So to match that, we're just pulling money from ours when we're already giving up that money.
So I think two important data points here would be like getting that direct feedback from particularly the nonprofit developers. Because what I hear from them over and over again is like any dollar we don't have to spend goes into subsidy. And so it may be a minor fee that we're forgiving. And this could include our building fees with Orange County. That's a question we have out there. And so that's a feedback point for the development community. And then, Hunter, you'd have exposure to other folks in the region. Chapel Hill is the only data point in Orange County we currently have that's doing this.
Okay, thank you. But even
Yeah.
it'd be helpful knowing what other fee structures are and how we compare. Certainly if we are overcharging, that's one thing, but if we are under, which I suspect, sorry, yes, sir.
Oh, just, maybe misunderstanding, if the comment was about, can we see or factor in how we're charging, what our system development fees are for water and sewer? Okay, good. I just want to make sure it wasn't that,
No,
because that's not in the
No.
statutory
Exactly.
equation for the,
No.
I just want to make sure.
nothing to do with those.
Hunter, I have a couple clarifications.
Yeah.
When you say in S8, priority utility allocation, can you clarify everything?
Yeah, Matt might have to help me out. I'm not a utilities guy, but I think the thought with that strategy was that if there's maybe parts of town that have additional capacity or could be allocated, that you could maybe shift affordable housing there with developers.
This is another one where the devil's in the details, where the translation from a recommended strategy to a program is gonna take some work. And so there's a few pieces that we have to pull together. Is one, what is our capacity that we have available to provide? Where is that capacity available? Two, if the board were interested in pursuing a prioritization, then you have to get into the methodology. Like, what is the methodology? At what level of affordability are you going to be willing to prioritize? And so this one will take a lot of staff work to get a proposal back to you all. I would say this is a longer term.
Correct.
Okay, and expedited review. I know that some of your work was in Orange County wide, and Chapel Hill was kind of notorious for having a complicated and long process,
Yes.
but I have never heard from Shannon or Matt that we have a particularly onerous process. So
Yeah. and
are we needing to fix something in terms of our timing? Or-
I wouldn't say fix anything. I think that's just, every community that we work in, Central Pines is in 50 communities. We hear that across the board. And so that's more of a general, if you're able to expedite or if you're able to find areas where you can do that. But we haven't heard anything from staff that is an issue.
That is another data point we want from the development community, because that was brought up, if you all recall, 2 summers ago at our affordable housing roundtable here. One of the things we heard from the developers was we really would appreciate not so much expedited, but a more predictable review process. And so it's about kind of both figuring out, okay, what are the log jams that our affordable housing developers are currently hitting against? And is there a way to adjust that or find a way to revise our process?
Thank you.
Any other clarifications?
I guess one of my questions, and this may be jumping the gun, but our practice of the developers coming and just temperature checking is, at this point, we're still keeping that or planning on keeping that.
Are you referring to the annexation letter? of
No,
interest?
no. That when developers will come and present an idea to essentially test the waters before
See
they,
if we're
before
did
they.
they go forward through the process?
Exactly, before they've expended, real money.
Let me answer that.
So this happens kind of informally and formally. You guys, I think, will sometimes get a reach out from developers kind of privately. And they're allowed to legally do that as long as they're following a legislative process. It's not quasi judicial, so they're allowed to speak with you outside of the meeting. I really like that they have the opportunity to kind of do the temperature check when they're planning on doing a major development or redevelopment plan. That generally is through the annexation interest processes when they see that. But they also have kind of asked informally, hey, could we have an item? We want to talk to the board about this idea we have. And we've kind of been open to doing that. I think it's worked really well for our community. As we grow, that may be less and less feasible to try and get kind of temperature checks on every new development project. But I think right now it's working and it's something that we could continue to discuss. I think it's good for developers, particularly to hear from this board that affordable housing is a priority for you. I say it. Sometimes you're like, yeah, that's nice. You're the planning director. We want to hear from the, the actual elected officials. And so it's good for them to
Well, I
hear.
just think
Well,
about,
that's up
you
to
know,
you.
South Waterstone where they came in and informally we asked, we laid out a lot of asks. They did respond. But if possible, I would like to see that continue. One, it is a dialogue before the developer has invested hard infrastructure, massive things where they're committed. And two, where we can have some real influence, and we're also learning from them at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. We could definitely, I think the last pillar was one on, regulatory reform. I think we could probably build that into that.
Okay, so we've made it to the fourth pillar, unless anyone has another question. Good. Okay, so this was the permanent affordability and capacity pillar. And so strategy one is to formalize a special revenue fund for affordable housing. And so I think of this almost as a container or like a bucket where all of the town's affordable housing money could go. So right now, if there's some left over from the 320,000 allocation, for example, that would go there. But also if the town's able to secure program income revenue at a future date, or philanthropy, or any kind of funds that could be put into that container. And then all of a sudden you have like a specific account, how much is in there, and you can use that number for priorities.
Is that where the payment in lieu monies would go into as
Exactly.
well?
Yes. So you have one container, one bucket, X amount, and how do we allocate this? And so strategy one, because that was the first thing that we thought of, but somehow it ended up at the end of the presentation. For strategy six, again, we've talked about AMI and where should funds go. We have this, workforce housing issue, but also affordability in general. But we did recommend that at least 70% of funds in that special revenue fund should be dedicated to 80% and below. So that's your, low income households, but with some flexibility for workforce housing opportunities should they arise.
Now, Hunter, one of the things too, because I know the state does not technically allow government public funding above 80%. With the new 21st century where there we were told at NARC, I think you were there, where the feds were saying that would essentially override state restrictions. Has the state seen that, or is this, do we really have the ability to go beyond 80% with public funding?
I would say, I wasn't there, and there's a lot in that bill that we're still kind of translating. But I don't know that it can kind of usurp state level requirements.
Because the federal government was very clear that state prohibits public funds from going above
80% AMI. That is in the regulations. I think here, and Matt, I don't know if, let's say philanthropy funds go into the special revenue account,
That's different.
okay, so make sure that doesn't like tie you into anything. But federal funds, for example, are also gonna limit you 80% AMI, LIHTC even lower.
Yeah, in 21st century, at least what we were told, was that they were raising those limits.
So to 100% of AMI is what I had written down.
For federal funds.
Federal funds, they did a lot, they're not expanding the pot, so you're competing. The same people who don't get much funding have to compete harder because they are getting less funding. But it gives some more flexibility, but they did raise those limits at that federal
Yeah.
level.
And I will say, before Matt jumps in, this is more also of a commitment. So
Okay.
just ensuring you never kind of dip below 70% targeted at those with the least resources.
Understood.
But with flexibility for the workforce.
And I would say from a staff perspective, we would treat that both as funding and sort of like effort priority. That gives us an opportunity to have discussions from like a development incentive level. You all, as through the UDO process, will set what those affordability expectations are to unlock those incentives. This gives a guidepost of how much effort to put on lower income versus workforce income. Yeah, Hunter, or one of you all just spoke to, like, we are hoping to have access to external funding, eventually that we could, put into programs like that. And so I think it's kind of, we'll figure out the details, but we want the feedback from you all. Is that the right split? Is there a different split you want to target?
So that's part of my question, is how did you determine 70 and 30%?
Well, I think it was, if an opportunity came up that was workforce housing, that was just really great and you didn't want to pass it up, if you do 10%, do you actually have any flexibility in that? So going with the majority and leaving that flexibility there was the number. But again, if there's feedback to, oh, it should be 50-50 or 90-10, that's certainly something we could include in the final numbers. Yeah. So the next strategy as well is more of a long-term one, but it's thinking about dedicated staff time to housing. I would say affordability in general, but then also the implementation of this strategy, because it will take someone kind of leading the charge. And so right away, that might just be kind of tweaking internal staff focus towards affordability in this plan. I'm sure it's top of mind anyway. But I think this is like a 3 to 5 year plan of like, could you hire a full-time staff person who is only focused on affordable housing? And so that, along with this final plug here of a strategy, but just assessing how much Central Pines Regional Council's grant assistance programs costs. That is a membership fee program that we have at the.
Weren't we already, don't we already do this? I thought we were.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think, it may have been something you talked about or you were a member and then left, but currently I don't think so.
Oh my gosh, because that's money left on the table.
Well, let me say this, we were a member of it and we didn't get any money out of it. I'll also say that every single, I'm sorry, I'm not pointing at you, it's like every time we've had companies come in and go, oh, we do an awesome job getting grants, like we pay people to do it, we have not got one dime out of anybody in my 29 years here ever when it comes to grants, so that's
Because I know that some of the county, other member governments are getting some serious cash. Is it, are we on the wrong side of the divide?
Well, so there, we listed, this has been around for about 3 years,
Yeah.
may have been when you joined, but there's been 40 grant awards for over 22 million, some combination of federal or state. And so from what I hear, it's successful. I don't know if I can get you a trial run or anything. But this isn't just like a joint recommendation. This is assess the cost and opportunities there.
But I'm wondering, because I know, what I've seen is at least, the awards just casual perusing, besides, the multi-jurisdictional, but they seem to, a lot of them, either they're joined up with Durham and or Raleigh or Johnson County.
Yeah.
Are we on the wrong side of the growth divide for some of those?
I think that's a good question, and it's certainly like worth a one-on-one meeting
Or could we
between staff.
somehow with, being next to Alamance, is there a way to partner with Piedmont Triad?
There could be. I think there's opportunity. And again, this is capacity because it is hard to find grants. It's hard to write the application. And so that's what the program does. And so it's a potential solution. I don't have specifics on the cost, but can certainly get those for review.
One of the questions I have, or concerns, I guess, about the strategy 10 about the town capacity, and this is just seeing these 12 or 13 strategies. There's
12.
13 written.
We removed one last
Like-
minute. Yeah.
I just noticed that, but out of the 12 strategies, this being the last one, I'm just wondering how realistic is the capacity of the town to get through all 11 before we hit 12, knowing when you bring the budget to us, you're like, look at how many people we haven't hired, but the population keeps going up. Like, this is a lot of work, and that's one that jumps out at me.
But it's also over several years, though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
This
It's
slide just
still-
kind of
yeah.
shows the,
still 11
But you're
Other
right,
thing that-
staff capacity is at the end there, but
So you all recall, this was one of the points in the community services reorganization is trying to free up additional staff capacity to deliver on this. And so part of that is you get more meat, to throw at it. And long-term, just like we're doing in several other areas, without, funding for a dedicated position, we're trying to cobble together a position out of pieces of people. And so, we've got several folks in the organization now that are starting to play more of a role in the affordable housing so that it's not just me, so that over time we have different folks taking different pieces of this. That's how we approach the comp sustainability plan. That's how we're approaching our GIS capabilities. And so we're, following Eric's Band-Aids and Bridges approach. We're building something out of chicken wire and loose bolts.
Well, Megan's comment is not lost on, I think, me or anybody else, that we know that we're asking you to do 437 different things. This would be a substantial increase in responsibility, even if shared among lots of people, which could be inefficient, by the way. The more people we have working on one thing, the efficiency there is.
And in keeping with the Hillsborough scale, one of the guidelines you all gave is you want a strategy that's Hillsborough scale. A lot of this is going to be contract or partnerships. We're not trying to build a whole affordable housing department here to manage a bunch of programs. Our programs will be targeted for low administrative overhead. If we have somebody else doing something that works, let's just figure out how either we can join with them or just take what they're doing and put our name on it. And so that's how we'll get it done.
I like the way you think.
yeah. And that's kind of what we have outlined here. Matt, I'm sure you could set up a special revenue fund tonight, right? No problem. But yeah, those year one or like year two are really, we're hoping low hanging fruit. Whereas, we understand that like hiring a full-time staff person is more long-term. And that's laid out in the strategy more in depth. This might be almost the last slide, but I just wanted to talk about the regional component of this because, affordable housing, while it's very local and personal issue to folks, it's also very regional. And so at the COG, this is something near and dear to us, but we do see opportunities regionally, whether it's, with Orange County, with the region at large. But we just put some opportunities at the regional level, whether it's, weatherization programs that are often federal funded for energy efficiency, bringing down utility cost. We'll have a program soon that serves Orange County. Data tracking is one that the COG is working towards, but also the tax relief at the county. And then, wherever you can get that kind of external funding and partnerships that Matt mentioned. And then, Matt, this was your slide. I think you already kind of outlined it up top.
Yeah, so we covered in general, Central Pines, their work on the project is completing. We're gonna take the handoff and finish it up. So one of the things that we would ask from you all, and similar to what the strategic plan team is doing, we'll put together a list of folks for outreach. Solicit feedback from you all to make sure that we've covered the development and nonprofit community. And then we're looking at different survey tools to post the document and get feedback from the community at large. And so several of the questions you all have asked tonight will go into, what kind of survey questions can we add to get that data?
When we post a document, it's intimidating for a lot of people. It's like, read a document. There's like a presentation like this, or even this presentation, is that something that we can post in addition to? So for those, it makes it more digestible and less intimidating.
Yeah, so now we have a dedicated affordable housing webpage, and so
Right.
we'll be able to put this information from tonight out there.
But I'm just thinking, instead of just the document, something, social media friendly where people are, they can get the high points quick, and if they want to go dig into the document, absolutely, but that's not the only place they can go to get the high points, because it is intimidating. And, if you're surfing around, ooh, I'm interested, but I only meant to be here for a few minutes. Well, if I can get some high points, at least I've got some information to provide some feedback and it ties in.
Yes, we can work on a summary for that. And then one of the things that communications and CPRC are doing right now is they're going back and revising the document to bring out more plain language and bring down the readability level as part of that effort to make it more accessible.
Thank you for that.
I think, Matt, when you mentioned that, I read public engagement tool. And that was something I was wondering about, is like bringing that level, so it's more manageable for folks, like if that public engagement tool is bringing people in for an open house, like South Church Street was done, but maybe there's examples of affordable housing schemes that makes it kind of more hands-on for folks that might be able to. I don't know if that's was a part of the thought process for this public engagement tool being versus something you just read, and because other people are gonna learn it in other ways.
Exactly. That's what.
We'll come back to you with a public engagement plan. When we put that tool in there was a specific tool we were evaluating that probably is not right for this effort, but we may bring into the UDO effort. And it's the tool that Capitol Hill is using for their Lumo. So you can go right now and put live edits and comments and right in the document. And so there are people who are going to have that level of contextual interest. But to your point, we also want a more user-friendly survey that we can have that's, you know, a few questions to gather data points about high level which direction this is facing. In terms of public meetings, open houses, again, yeah, the staff recommendation would be that time is probably better spent on direct engagement with the development community, because that's how this stuff is going to translate. And general feedback is more likely going to be, yes, we support affordable housing. It needs to be as cheap as possible. You need to put as much money as possible in it. And so that's not helpful for how you all prioritize your funding.
And you mentioned it there, like that was actually one of the comments that I make. I feel like it's so important to make sure we get the right developers in here, be it large scale, small scale, if there's like financing, lending, our community trust partners, that kind of stuff. It's just making sure that everybody is there in the room.
Hearing this conversation, it makes me think that what we're building is a comprehensive affordable housing strategy, and that I think our residents and community at large would really like to see an emphasis from the town put on that and how it's aligned with our comprehensive sustainability plan and our strategic plan as well. So I wouldn't want us to miss an opportunity, how we communicate this stage of the process and where we're going with it. I think that's an asset to the community to know that we're really engaged and thinking hard and planning and strategizing to make this work over the long term.
Really get the buy-in. If we don't know the buy-in, then it's nothing.
Well, I mean, in terms of, that's the tricky part is, the development community is what will make it happen.
Yeah. We've got to be there.
And Home Builders Association and Jacob, his organization just hit the two major developer communities that you hit just across the region.
I feel like the small scale builder is one that just don't want to be missed. We get like we have
They're still part of the Home Builders Association
Yeah.
for them. That's why I say the Home Builders Association. And I always screw up the acronym for Jacob Roger. I butcher his name. Sorry, Jacob. But those two organizations, you pretty much hit every developer from small to large across the region, because they're already looking here. It's not a matter of that, they're already looking, small scale, large scale, they already know the opportunities. We're the ones that are the last to know in a lot of ways, but at least if we can get those two easily to get the broadest coverage, to get the interest and feedback of those who are most likely to be active in our community.
Well, that I think that is part of my my point is that these small scale builders, they're members of our community. And the ones that be great to be filling in that infill versus regional, state, national builders, and just really make sure that we're not putting up barriers for these smaller organizations to build in Hillsborough. But
Yeah,
the
Yeah,
large
yeah,
ones
but,
are.
when we send the list, we'd love to hear if there's folks you have in mind specifically. And this is going to be the impact of the development regulations and the UDO rewrite is going to be more impactful. And so we want to sort of figure out how to get those inputs together. Is like, okay, our affordable housing strategy says this. Does that make sense for you, developer builder, as you know, something that is doable, or is it creating additional barriers? And then how does that translate in the UDO to the proposed regulations? And so that would be part of how we think through this, and how do we get that information and make it usable in both places.
I think that the other thing with the community is the more we can help the community understand not only what options are, but you know, what we as a town, what we can and can't do. And also they're property owners. In the end, it's a contract between property owner and a developer. The property owner has the most control of who they sell that land to, who they contract with. They choose. We don't. And the more that we can engage, and also part of it's an empowerment of what is in their control and linking their interests and their community interests with personal interest in what they do. And you still have choice, but tying it together, because so often it's disparate. Because a decision is made, you know, on selling, what's the opportunity that may or may not. Sometimes it is tied in with greater community by commit to the community, and sometimes, well, you've got pressing needs. If a parent's in, you know, long-term hospice or medical bills, things like that, that's gonna, those immediate needs.
I think I've lost my place on where we are. Round number 5.
Well, we're wrapping up. This is, you know, the next steps that Matt alluded to. But the kind of feedback and information you provided tonight, we will incorporate that into the draft. We're also, Central Pines is working with communications staff to make it more accessible, and then we will do a final professional design of the document and then hand that off to the town to run with it from there. But really, that's all I had. And I want to thank the commissioners for your time tonight, but also your meetings with me and input on the process, and also your staff. They were really great and helpful throughout as well. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you and Central Pines for the good work that you've done. This is like one of the most important topics that we have, so I feel that you're helping us meet that need. So thank you. Any other final questions?
I actually have a few that one of them being is thinking about the measurement points for each of these strategies and when have we succeeded in knowing that part of it. You know, that will come probably as this develops more. There was one item that I was just curious, it's not as a strategy. And that's having a list of our housing stock. What type of housing do we already have? And I don't know. I'm just wondering why that is not part of the plan and why not, like, I feel like we should know what we have to know what we're missing.
Yeah, certainly. And it may not be a strategy, but that's certainly something we can provide in kind of the data piece of the strategy itself. So that's a good point. I think we delve into those numbers with like the NOAA units and the cap. But maybe we should make that more clear and upfront.
Yeah, to be clear, this is a distillation of a much larger document. You all haven't seen the data and the analysis. That's part of what's still being cleaned up. And so some of that's going to be addressed there.
Okay.
But at that point, if there's additional metrics that you'd like to see us research, we can do that. And then in terms of the measurement points, one of the components of the draft document is what does success look like and what are those performance measures? And then this also is gonna feed into the development of the strategic plan. And so some of these items are gonna be incorporated as we go through that effort.
Let's see. All right, I think most everything else will come out. In watch.
Well, again, feel free to reach out at any time. I'll be going out on parental leave in about 2 weeks, but if you have any questions before then, send them my way. But if not, we'll get them to who can answer.
We still have
And
some
CC,
for calls,
CC
right?
Matt, when you send those.
Yes, absolutely. But we're happy to, as you all are working through the handoff and the next steps, we're still here to answer any questions and help as we can. So, yeah, thank you again.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Have a good night. Okay, that takes us to committee updates and reports. Kathleen?
For partnership, so partnership is now completed. They now have the COC and the partnership. We do need to have an alternate delegate for the COC. And so to make a very long story short, the partnership and the COC they were apart, they kind of got convoluted, they're back apart. COC handles only ESG and the federal funds, that's it. Partnership handles everything else on funding. And there's still the bigger issues of the municipalities are still not on the same page of what is municipal versus county. And I'll just leave it at that. It's the games continue. Central Pines, we meet this week. And that's it for my activities right now. We have local reentry council that'll be coming up. And I don't have anything for that at the moment.
Thank you. Rob?
Parks and Recreation met last week, didn't have enough for a quorum, so we didn't vote on anything. But we talked through some stuff. One of the things, the main thing that we talked about was, if you'll remember, we had approved 2 picnic shelters, one for Case Creek and then one down by Gateway, that building called Weaver Street. Gateway. Is that a building?
Gateway.
Gateway Center.
That was gone.
Gateway.
And Matt, I believe it sent out an email, if I remembered, regarding if there were any concerns or questions. So the proposal was potentially to put a second one over Cates Creek. Near, adjacent to kind of the skate park, so they would have some shade over there, and then also just kind of a more of a gathered sort of place, but. And I don't think there was any feedback that we got from those emails, so we're assuming that you all are okay with that?
I emailed Stephanie that.
Okay, good.
Third, yeah.
Okay. That was really the major discussion that we kind of talked about, and so the Parks and Recreation Board is gonna move forward with a potential proposal for a second shelter at Cates Creek, and then obviously that would come back to us, but and there's a bunch of design and obviously stuff that needs to go into that, but that was kind of the core of what we had covered and talked about. Other than that, I was able to attend Jim Zetta's funeral on Saturday. 3 over here. It was very wonderful, nice event. By lots of people. So, good. I thought that.
Thank you, Rob. I have TPO tomorrow and we have established a bylaws committee to review and update the bylaws for the TPO, which haven't been done in quite some time, so looking forward to that. And then Megan and I have swag on Thursday.
Mark, is there anyone on TPO that's involved with AMPO?
That's a topic that comes up very frequently, including today. Is there a particular question? I mean, we meet,
No, it's just that we're missing out on the opportunity of, there's a lot of good ideas that we're seeing, you know, AMPO used to be part of NERC. They split up, but there's still a very close relationship, but there is a lot of synergy that occurs between MPOs and COGS that we're not seeing in our region. But it would make a huge difference if there are members of the TPO and MPOs in our region that were participating to see what's possible.
I will bring that up tomorrow. Yeah,
Because we are the largest region where the left hand, the right hand don't know they exist on the same body.
Received. Thank you. Megan.
So last week TDA had met and, Shannon sent, an answer to the question about the ad that was placed, and that was separate from the tourism board funds. So, forward that on to y'all so you could see the nice ad that was put in the best of Chapel Hill. Come and see the best of Hillsborough. Oh, and then, we approved it tonight. The Cycle North Carolina Mountains to Coast Ride is gonna be, I don't know if you're around October 5th or 6th, just be prepared. There's like 800 to 900 cyclists coming in.
Where's the camping?
Sorry.
Where's the camping?
So River Park is going to be, and then behind the elections office in that parking lot, they've sold out all the hotels. So, Shannon's got a whole list of things to do.
Strong public information campaign tomorrow.
So yeah, let everybody know just to be ready for that, that group coming in, but I think it's gonna be pretty cool. Because there's that many
Cool,
riders
yeah.
coming in.
Yeah, they came through Chapel Hill several years ago and came to one of our parks and, you know, they're just it's a nice group of people. They get to a place and they're very, you know, glad that they got there and then they go out and eat and drink and spend money and then they move on to the next,
Yeah.
you know, the next city, but,
And then they'll circle back around to Hillsborough at another time and spend more money and it'll be great. So that was one of the things that we talked about in the TDA. Also this last week, I attended the League of Municipalities short session recap. And probably a few of you might have also been in attendance there. And then this week, as Mark said, we are gonna go to SWAG. So that's all I got for updates.
Thank you. Really quick updates. So as the mayor said, TPO meets tomorrow, and then last week, the Visitors Bureau met, and really it was about the transition of the executive director, Lori Policelli, who will be retiring in a little over 2 months. But we had the opportunity to speak with Steve Brantley as well as the county manager, Travis, to, you know, ask questions about what that transition looks like, opportunities for getting into alignment with various tourism partners, and that sort of thing, to really use this as an opportunity when through certain budget decisions and Lori leaving, that the tourism program could be in a little bit of limbo. And I think that the manager heard a lot of us very clear about what we're looking for in terms of the tourism program. And to, you know, just remind the county that the way the tourism program is set up, they'd like to see it to be self-sustaining, but oftentimes you need some extra cash too. And you can recoup those revenues. But it may not be, you know, immediate, but it would be more immediate than a lot of other types of economic development. And I think that was very well received, so. TBD on how the Visitors Bureau moves forward, but I think they're gonna come back to us with feedback on the national search that they're going to do and that sort of thing, so. It'll be a fun few months.
Okay, we're ready to move to closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Matt. All in favor?
Okay.
Any opposed? We'll adjourn for like 5 minutes, take a break. And then we'll go into